With the addition of the Wasp Queen and the Infected Broodmother in the two most recent patches for Grounded, a common question I've been getting and one that I kind of expected to start coming in was, which boss would I like to see be added next if another boss is added, and which ones do I think will be added in the future? So what I want to do in this video is talk about where and what bosses I think might be added to Grounded. So first up, I want to go to the sandbox, because the sandbox is a place where we all expected a boss to be added to it. Specifically, if you're in here in the back end of the sandbox, down in the bottom corner here, you go back here and see this rock. At one point when this was first added, when the sandbox was first updated in last in 2022 at some point, or 2021, I can't even remember, it's been so long. When the sandbox was updated, this area here did not have this rock. You could actually fall down in this hole. Now, it wasn't very deep, but there was a hole down there. So we all expected or many of us expected a boss or some area to be underneath there, like a tunnel area, and that would be a perfect place for an arena. In the game files at one point, or right before early access, there was a lizard in the game files that was a boss. I think I did a YouTube short on it a while back in 2022, excuse me. The years are rolling together at this point. And the lizard boss was, I believe, in this area underneath it here, and it had a massive health bar, and it did not end up making it into the 1.0 release. And as of now, I don't believe it's getting added. There's been a few reasons for that. One, I think, is because I'm not sure how it would scale properly with it being so much larger than everything else in the game. It'll be magnitudes larger than all the other bosses. And then two, I think the devs mentioned something about, well, the lizard would have blood, and they didn't really want to have blood in the game because nothing really else has blood in the game. All the bugs just have little goo that pops out. So I don't think a lizard's going to be added, although they could maybe do some creative with it, maybe make it a little bit smaller, or perhaps getting rid of the blood and just putting goo or something in there and in its place. But I don't really think a lizard's going to be added. So what other bosses could possibly be added to the sandbox? There's two I can think of. One would be an adult antlion. Now, I did some research, and the antlions you see in the game right now are actually larva versions of the antlions. So all their behavior, the way they look like larva of antlions. They're kind of, if you think about it, they're going to be like almost like soldier versions of them. So you can see they pop out of the ground here. They're wandering around on the ground. They're not popping out because I'm in creative, but they'll pop out of the ground. They're in the little tunnels here, and basically antlions will burrow underneath of loose soil or sand. So in this case, they're in the sand. They have their little tunnels. What ends up happening is once they're getting to the point where they're going to go from the larva stage to the adult stage, what they do is they'll form they'll go hide underground, and they'll form themselves a little pupa, and they'll eventually pop out as a adult. The adults will have wings, and they'll be, I believe they're much larger than this. So to me, that could make sense. Although from the little bit of research I did on the adult antlions, it seems like the larva version of them are more tanky. So they have like this armor on them that you obviously, if you fought them, you'll know they have like a tough shell on them. The adults don't seem to be as tough, so I'm not sure if that would make sense, but they could somehow work in having an adult antlion, which would be larger than the regular ones, and perhaps add that to the game. I think more likely than the lizard or the antlion, if they added a boss to the sandbox, would be for them to add a black ant queen. So we're going to talk about a different ant queen next once we get out of the sandbox. But right now, let's talk about the black ant queen that could possibly come. Now, of course, the assistant manager is inside of the black ant hill, so it might not make sense to add a boss related to that area. But we do know that ants do like, from my research, ants do like to go inside sandboxes. So I was looking at which kind of bugs go in sandboxes. So theoretically, this could just be a side area. Maybe they could somehow connect it to the anthill, or it could just be an area you just could get to from going into the sandbox. And they could put a black ant queen in there. There was an ant queen, I believe, in the game files, if I'm remembering correctly. So they could theoretically add an ant queen to the game, although I think the one that's more likely is going to be a different ant queen. And let's go talk about that. So I'm going to head over to the upper yard, and we're going to talk about the ant queen that I think, and the boss that I think is most likely to be added if they add a boss to Grounded in a future update. So while the sandbox could be a good location to put a boss, and there might be a boss coming there at some point in the future, I think a more likely location will be in the Fire Ant Hill. So I'm up here in the upper yard, kind of in the north central part of it. We're near the Jungle Ant Hill entrance. We're just going to walk through here. And this is a very large tunnel system. There will be, there's got to be a place in here they could sneak in an arena. Now, I will say the one thing that would possibly stop that from happening, and as you can see here, the ants apparently are enjoying their donuts here. They are stocking up on them. Hopefully this doesn't cause any performance issues. There's not too many of them, but they are starting to build up. This anthill has room for, they could easily just put off a side room or something for the boss. I will say that all the bosses up to this point are in kind of like little separate arenas, so maybe it wouldn't make sense for it to be in here. So if they added the Fire Ant Queen could be just like in an adjacent area or something like that. But I think a Fire Ant Queen would be the most likely boss. There was an Ant Queen, I believe, in the game files, if I remember correctly, along with the lizard that I talked about earlier. I'm pretty sure there was an Ant Queen. And the way I would see it working would be having the Ant Queen. It could actually be similar to the Termite King. Now, the Termite King, if you're not aware, is basically just a reskin version of the regular termites. It's just been made larger. So they basically took the model of one of the termites and increased the size of it. I could see them doing the same thing with a Fire Ant Queen by just basically taking the regular Fire Worker Ant and just making it larger and having that be the model for it. So think of it as almost like they did with the Infected Broodmother. They basically took the Broodmother, reskinned it, and then kind of added some different attacks to it. I could see them doing something like that for the Fire Ant Queen. It could even be out here inside this arena or something like this, because this is pretty easy to get to. I guess there'd have to be a way to get out to it. But basically what I would see it being would be a larger version of the Worker Ant, and it would have the same attacks as the regular ants, where it would be able to do the little lunge attack. It would do the little stabbing attack like with the little pincer things here, and it'd also be able to spit acid at you. I would also see it being similar to the Termite King, and well, not similar to the Termite King, but similar to the other, like the Broodmother, Infected Broodmother, Wasp Queen, where they summon in ads. Even actually the assistant manager does that, as does the director, where they summon in ads. That would mean they would summon in, perhaps it would start out with the first wave. The first phase could be something like spawns in a couple of Fire Worker Ants, and then later on it could summon in Fire Soldier Ants, and then maybe later on after that it summons in a combination of the two. So think of it as like the Wasp Queen fight, hopefully not with as many ads being spawned in, because the Wasp Queen fight now has, I think the last time I did it had something like 16 wasps spawned in during the fight, so that was quite a bit. So that's what I would see it doing, and I would say it would probably make sense for it to be resistant to corrosion, because it would make sense because the Fire Ant armor adds corrosion damage to you, so it would make sense, and they also spit the acid at you, so maybe it could be resistant to acid and the corrosion damage dealt by the Fire Ant gear. And then for me, if we look at the bosses that are currently in the game and take a look at what they have to offer in terms of gear, I think it would make sense for it to be very similar to the new Wasp Queen, where it comes with a single weapon. So the Wasp Queen comes with, once you kill the Wasp Queen, you're able to craft the Bard's Bow. And then it also comes with a headpiece, and the headpiece is simply the Bard's Tutor. What this does is the Bard's Tutor gives you, it'll make it so that the wasp will ignore you unless you attack them. And it also will give you the ability to put a debuff on your enemies if you're using a bow. So the way I would see it being would be something similar to that, where instead of it being a bow, I think it would make sense, because we already have the Black Ant sword, we could have a tier 3 sword. I would call it basically the Blade of the Ant Queen. So it would be a tier 3 sword, and for me it would be coated with acid. So it would do similar damage to, it would give the acid damage and then help with the corrosion. So it would work very well with the Fire Ant armor, because the Fire Ant armor does that. It gives you plus corrosion, and if you have the full set on, it'll give you the ability to do acid splash damage. So I think it would basically synergize pretty well with that armor. And then the headpiece could be similar to how the Bard's Tutor works, except where the Bard's Tutor works with charging your range shots. Perhaps the Crown of the Ant Queen, as I was going to be calling it, where it basically, if you have it on, Fire Ants would ignore you. I think that would be super helpful, especially in the upper yard, because if you go through the upper yard, these little guys are everywhere. They are just, to be completely honest, that I've seen many people comment on it, and for me, just going back through the upper yard the other day, they are just everywhere, and they get to a point where, like, once you've gotten their parts and made the armor and the Fire Ant Club, you really just don't want to fight them anymore, and they are everywhere. They're basically I don't even know what they would compare to the lower yard, because nothing in the lower yard is over the entire yard. The Fire Ants are covering like 2/3 of the upper yard. They're pretty much everywhere. So if they would ignore you, that'd be super useful. And then they could also make it where they changed the Bard's Tutor. So the Bard's Tutor, when you have it on, will make bees aggressive to you all the time. So I would think if you had on the Crown of the Ant Queen, it could make red and black ants always aggressive to you, and perhaps even termites are always aggressive anyway, but at least the red and black ants could always be aggressive to you. Because I know like the red ants are normally not aggressive, the soldiers are, and the black ants, the ones up on by the shed are aggressive all the time, where the other ones are, when you're down near their hill, the workers are not aggressive. Of course, the soldiers are always aggressive. And then also with it could give a buff to charged melee attacks. So basically, if you have your weapon out, you hold it down and you do the heavy attack, bam, do the hit. So similar to how you can do a charge shot with bows, it will give you the charged melee attack could apply a negative effect. So the Bard's Tutor provides a 10% chance for providing a negative effect. The negative effects are negative attack, which means the enemy you're hitting will do less attack damage to you. It can do negative damage resist, which means it'll lower its damage resistance, which means you'll do more damage to it. And it can also apply a bleed effect. So it's only going to apply one of those three, but the bleed effect will do damage over time. So I think it would make sense if the Crown of the Ant Queen could do something similar for melee weapons, because then that'll be kind of like the counterpart to it. So anyway, those are what I'm thinking. I think an Ant Queen's the most likely, whether it's a Black Ant Queen or a Fire Ant Queen. I think that will be the most likely next boss added to the game. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you found this video interesting, if you found it helpful, make sure to hit the like button. And here's another video you might find helpful as well.